Okay, so this session is going to be about an introduction to APIs and an introduction to Postman as well. Postman is an application that helps us communicate with APIs and also test APIs, right? So anybody has any idea of what an API is? If they can just let us know. Anyone? Somebody should have worked with it already, right?
Yeah, so one of the examples of API that I worked recently was like that. Let's say some stock price is there. So the price of some company. So we can actually call the API, and the API responds back by giving us the price at that moment in time, and then we utilize that data for whatever we want to do.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So thank you, Seshan, for that. An API is, like you said, it takes request and gives you the responses. Okay, that's what it does. It does some processing at the backside also, right? But ideally, in the bigger context, an API, is a kind of an interface for us to talk to, a server, right? In a business context, if I have to explain you, let me share my screen. You're able to see the image.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you have, there's an example. There's a waiter, okay, who is marked as the API. There's a user who asks for something. The waiter goes, gets the request, and then comes back and gives it to the user, right? This is an example, right? But in the business context, if you check, we order using Swiggy, Zomato, and all that, right? So we have a mobile app, right? The mobile app makes a request to an API when we want to buy something and place an order, right? So then it goes to the server, it creates the necessary rows on the server so that the business can start working on the order and track it. And then it gives us back the response, the some information that the mobile app receives and shows it to us, right? So it is a gateway for applications to talk to each other, right? So it basically requires coding to create and work with APIs, because that's how applications talk to each other, right? So here's an example API. Okay, it's called Simple Tool Rental API, right? So what happens here is it's available at this URL. Okay, so what happens here is it lets you rent tools. Okay, it's like an order management system for a tool, all right? So you can check all the tools available. You can check what all tools are available for rent and what all tools are listed but not available also, right? Then you can also check what are all the orders that are there. You can create a new order. You can update an order. You can delete an order. Right? All this stuff you can do using this API. Okay. So, so now, before we look further about this API, I'll just go to Postman. Right. So this Postman is a tool that lets us communicate with the API in a very easy way. So I said API requires coding, right? So what Postman does is it gives you a UI so that we can, key in the information in just text boxes on the UI, and it takes those information and then creates the code that is required to talk to the API. It sends the request on behalf of you. It gets the response and then visualizes the response for you on screen, right? So this is a tool that you can use to communicate with APIs. And also test, right? So I'm first gonna create a new collection. I'll just tell you what a collection is, right? A collection is a collection of requests. It's a bucket of requests, right? So I'll first, so if you go back here, you see this first thing is called status. So this thing is called API documentation. And to understand the working of any API, you need to know the API documentation, right? Without this API documentation, you cannot, possibly get started with an API because you don't know what the API does, what all requests it can get, what all it can give you in response. You don't know anything about it unless you have this document, right? So you first need to get your hands on whatever API you're working for. You need to get this documentation for that. So the first thing here is get status, right? So get is a HTTP verb. So HTTP is hypertext transfer protocol that you can use those to communicate across the internet. there are many many requests in HTTP. I'll just show you a few, but to first start with, I'll just say, okay, I just do 20th March. Right. So now this is a collection that I've created. Okay. Inside this, I'm going to add a first request, right? Get status. So here is the place where you can choose what kind of a HTTP request to use for talking to the API. First is this, right? So now this API is available, like I said, in this place, right? So what I'll do is I'll just put this here, right? And I'm going to so inside this API, you need to go to slash URL. Inside this, you have to go to slash status to check if the API is up or down, if it is running as expected or if it is not. Okay. So you just go to slash status and hit send. You're getting a response, back saying that it is up. All right. So now this is a JSON response. It shows it to you this way, right? Now, if you go back, now the next one is tools, get tools. And if you see, it's on the same base URL, right? So instead of repeating it everywhere, you can actually, save this base URL, right? As a variable, right? That way you change it in one place and it reflects everywhere, if the URL changes for the API. Okay. So I'm gonna create a new set as a new variable. I'm gonna call it base URL2. I already have one, so that's why. Right? I will make it into this collection. That way it's not okay. Cool. So set this, right? So if you hover over this now, it shows you what is stored here. All right. So that's the base URL. Inside that you have status and you have this running. Right? So let us go to the next, get all tools. So basically that is, you can get a list of tools, right? And it'll give you the list of tools and some detail for those tools, right? So let me create a new request to show that to you. So get all tools. Right? So I'm gonna go with base URL, right? So only variables available inside this collection will show up here, right? So if I had stored it inside this other collection, it won't show up here. And if you want variables to be passed across different collections, you need to store them as global variables. For now, I'll get tools. So I'm gonna hit send. Now it gives me a list of tools that are available. It gives me the tool ID, it gives me the tool category, gives me the tool name, and if it is in stock or not, right? So I get lots of responses and all of these are in JSON, right? So there are something called parameters that you can play with to modify your request to get stuff accordingly, right? And this documentation shows you what are the parameters you can use. You can use category, results, available, right? Available is a Boolean, results is an integer. It gives you how many number of tools will be sent back on the response. Maximum it is 20 according to this API. Categories, you can filter for the required category. You have lawn care, electric generators, trailers, power tools, plumbing, and ladders. Right. So here it's a mix of everything. It's plumbing, this is power tools, etc. You can do that. Right. So just go. So these are called query parameters. If you see, it's written in query, in query, in query. Right. So whatever you add as a parameter here, okay, let us say category electric generators. Now you see it got added up here after a question mark, right? That is the query parameter, right? Now if I say send, now I'll get only electric generator tools on the result, right? So now that is the help of the query parameter. If you want to limit the results, you can do that. Results, say give me only 2, right? Send. There you go, you got only 2. Okay. But both, this one is not available, this one is available, right? So you can also play with that. Available, true, right? Send. There you go, true, true. You get the first 2 available tools on electric generators. All right. So that is, so these are all different ways your application can request data from a server, right? So that is another example. Moving on to tool ID. Okay, all right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more request. I'm going to get more details on a single tool. Right now I got this ID, right? This is 4875 from my last request, which is get all tools. I got this ID, tool ID 4875. I want to use this ID and then get more details about that single tool, right? So I need to get this ID dynamically. So at some point of time, if I change the electric generator to say ladders or something, I get a different ID on the first tool, right? I want to take that ID and then I want to check further about that tool details, right? So how do I do that? So Postman lets you create testing scripts in JavaScript, and you can use that testing scripts to parse your response and get that variable that you want, right? And you can use that variable on your next request, right? So I'll just show that. So here's a section called test, right? If you go here, it lets you write a script here, right? So this needs a little bit of a JavaScript stuff, all right? But I'm gonna show you how to get this first ID. All right, now if you look at this response, it is a JSON. Okay, it has two objects. This is the first object and this is the second object. And inside the first object, you have an ID that you want the number from, right? You basically create a JavaScript variable or response, right? And then you parse your response, postman.response.json. All right, now that it is parsed and stored inside that variable, you can get that, right? And you need to store it somewhere, right? I'm going to create another collection variable called tool ID. Now, like I did for the base URL, I'm going to create one more for tool ID, right? So pm dot collection variables dot set. Okay, the variable name should be tool ID, right? And I'm going to get that from, I'm going to pass this response that I got, right? Response 0, the first object inside the response dot ID, right? So once I do this, I need to get a collection variable. Where can I see that? If I click on this collection name, right, I get a new tab and inside this variable. At the moment I only have one variable, that is base URL, right? The moment I run this request, right, it is going to get this request response and then execute the script inside this test, right? That way this variable will be created. It's called tool ID. Let's send this again. I got a response back. The ID should be 4875. Let's go to here. See, tool ID is 4875, right? So we got that. I don't know why this happened. It's okay. All right. So this way you can store that. And then, so the next step is when you run the next request, you can use it, right? So here I'll just go with base URL. Yeah. And then I can do tools, right? So now there's another interesting thing here. So if you look at this, now for single tool, there's something like, the symbol here, and then you have a tool ID. Okay, this is called a path variable. All right, so now what this means is you can go to your base URL /tools/ a number here, that is a tool ID, and that number can change depending on what tool you want to get your details for. But the structure of the URL is same. It is tool ID there. Okay, that's why it's called a path variable. It can change based on what you want to query. All right. So if you go back to this, I can also create a path variable here, right? If you write /tool ID, right? Now this is going to be, see, this section appeared here. It's called a path variable, right? Now you can get your value of the tool ID that you stored here, right? Right, right. So now if you send this, you're going to get the details about that single tool. So it is base URL tool, and this is a path variable that you get that from the collection variable that you stored from your previous request, right? So that way you get ID, category, name, manufacturer, price, current stock, how many are there in stock, 10 you have in stock is true or not, right? So that is how you can, use path variables, right? Now moving on. this. Okay, now comes another interesting part. This is orders, right? And to get orders, you need authorization, because see, this part is customer facing part where, somebody can request what all tools are available in the API. They can, get details about a single tool. But the moment you want to get all the orders available on the tool, you need authorization. Or if you want to place an order, they need to know who you are. So you have to register your client and then place an order, right? And that requires again authorization. Now coming to authorizations, right? APIs have lots of different types of authorizations. So I'll just create one more request for authorization and then I will show you that request. And I'll change it into a post. So get, typically means you're getting information from the API, right? Post typically means just sending information to the API. Okay. Patch is more like updating, deleting is deleting, right? Others we leave for now, right? So get most likely does not have a body, because you want to get information from the API. You don't send anything to it. So your request body would most likely be empty. But the moment you change it to post, you're going to send some information to the API and that would be in your request body. All right. So you got to put that information here, whatever you wish to send to the API. Right. So now let us go to how to register our client, and because without that, you can't really get the orders. So you have to post it to base URL/API clients. All right. Okay, cool. Now, what do you have to send there? You need to send a client name and a client email, right? And this is what you'll get in return. You'll get a created bad request or a conflict. So if your API is already, if your client is already registered, you'll most likely get a conflict, and that is identified using your client email. Okay, so okay, let's do that. So let's go to body, and then let's write this. Okay. This is the example request body. I'm copying this, make it raw JSON. Right, I'll paste this, right? But most likely this email is already used, so it won't work, right? So let me try something very basic, abc123@gmail.com. Right? Let's send this. API client already registered, try a different email. So this is also already registered. You can't really, possibly write and every new email, everything, you want to run this client. So what we'll do is we'll use something like, called a random email ID that Postman can generate for you. It has a big database of these random kind of stuff that can help you test APIs with, sending multiple values to see if your API responds properly or not, stuff like that. So I'm gonna use one of those, right? Do this, two curly braces, put a dollar inside, and you get all this random stuff. Okay, I'm gonna go with random email ID, random email. Okay, now let us send this. There you go. So once you send this, you got an access token back, right? Now this access token is something that authorizes you to check for different orders. You can place more orders and all that stuff. Okay. So you got to pass this access token on every order request that you are sending to the API. That way the API knows that it is you, your registered client, right? So you can either save this manually into a variable, or you can probably use a test script to save that variable, right? I showed you how to save it to a collection variable. Now I'll show you how to save it to a global variable. All right. So as usual, I'm passing it into response, and then I want to set global variables, globals dot set, right? It's called access token. Okay. And I'm going to get response dot access token. Do not make any mistake. I'll copy it from here. Right. So let us send this. Gotcha. See, this time it still gave us an access token because it sent a new random email ID. Right. If you want to check what that random email ID is, you can go to your console here at the bottom. Right. So, these are the post requests that we sent. The latest one with the response to the request body is here. It sent this email ID, right, which is random. Okay. You can That's how we can use the console. Now let us go and check if we have the global variable, right? So there's a button here on the top. Okay, it's called environment quick look, right? You click on this. See, you have order. Okay, you can forget the order ID because I got it from my earlier request. So this time I think we only saved the access token, right? So this is a new one that we just saved. And if you see, this access token here is pretty same as this one here, right? So if you send a request again, it's going to give you a new access token, and you go to this variable, see it is updated, right? That way it is up to date. And now we can go ahead and create an order request, right? So let's create a new request. Okay, should be post. I don't know why it still says get. Yeah. Okay. Now get get all. Okay, why don't we go with create order? We have lots of get request, right? So to create an order, let's go back and see what all do we need, right? Yeah, to create an order, you need authorization. You need to send the tool ID. You need the customer name and comment, right? But this one is optional, right? You need the customer name, tool ID. So these are the two things that is you have to send on your body, and you need to have authorization. So you have to pass your token, bearer token, right? And comment is optional. Okay. So if you come back here, before that, so for this request, which is the status request, we got a 200 okay. 200 basically means it is okay. You got a good request, good response back. For all get request, it will most likely be 200, right? For a post request, so this one is 201 created. 201 means HTTP code means created. So it has created it has registered your API client. Okay, that's what it means. Now coming back here, for this create order also, you have to get a 201 back, right? But let us create an order for the tool ID that we saved last time, okay, from the get all tools request. This one, we save this tool ID here, right? Let us use that, and then let's create an order ID. Okay, so you have to give the authorization. So let's go to authorization, select bearer. Okay, so these are different types of authorization. Basic authorization asks for a username and a password. API key asks for a API key. So the one that this API allows is bearer token. So let's go with bearer token, and let us get the access token here. Okay, in global, right? Now authorization is ready, and if you see here, it has generated a header for you automatically. So typically when you write code, okay, you have to write a code like this, okay, like something like this, and further when you write body, so this code will expand, right? So this Postman is generating these for you at the back end, okay, so that it communicates with the API. So the moment you choose the authorization and select the value, it creates this header for you automatically that it sends. Okay, so that's what it does. Now let us put this. JSON, right? So this should be the tool ID that we got, right? And this should be body. Let us see. And okay, the URL is still not there. It should be post. So for creating an order, you need to post it to orders, right? Right. Let us see if it works. Order 201 created, right? And you have the order ID here. Okay. Likewise, you can store the order ID, using the script, like I said, and then you can do your next steps as to, update an order. You can change the name or change the numbers, etc. You can also delete that order and all that stuff you can do, right? Now, that is how you talk to an API using Postman. Now, I'll just take a few more minutes, like 2 to 3 minutes, and then show you how to automate this. Okay, there's a lot of testing that can happen in a Postman for the API, which is not very relevant for us, but I just wanted you to know, what all can be done here, right? So let us say somebody's an API developer and they're creating these APIs. They want, they're adding more functionality to the API and then they're publishing it, right? Every time they publish a new version of the API, they want to test how it works, like a test before they deploy it, right? So each and every one of this is a request, and inside each and every one of these requests, you can write a test script, like I showed you, right? So they would write JavaScript here to check a lot of aspects that they get back from the response. They can also store variables from one response and take that to the next response and automatically, process. So it's like a full flow. You first check if the API is working, then you get all the tools, see if the API is responding with all the tools that are there. You take one of those tool IDs and create the next request to get that tool details. Then you register your client, get all the orders, you use one of these tool IDs to check a specific order, or use one of the order IDs to check a specific order, then use one of those order IDs to delete an order. So all these are functionalities of API that you're testing, right? So you can, instead of running these, like selecting one of each request and then go ahead and clicking send every time, it's going to be a difficult task for a big API and a big test, right? You can actually automatically run each of them together. So that's why you put them inside a collection, right? You right click on this, say run collection. It will run it on the status. You can uncheck anyone. Say, for example, if you don't want to register here, you use the existing authorization token and API access token. It's fine. You can uncheck this. Or you can also skip that programmatically in this request, get single tool details test script. If you write a line to mention that the next order should be, sorry, the next request should be get create order, then it will skip this and come here. You can do that as well, right? Now you can do this stuff. You can also save the responses. If you click on persist responses for a session, it will save all the responses that gets back. Run this. Okay, what error here happened here? Some error happened here. Let's go back to get all tools. Runs fine for me here. I don't know. Something happened here. Request URL is empty. Oh, it's not. Okay, I don't know what's going wrong. Maybe we can check that later. But yeah, the idea is that you can automate that run by clicking on run collections, and you can also schedule these collections to run periodically, once every day, stuff like that, so that you can get emails on your inbox if the API tests fail. That way you can go ahead and check immediately what happened. That's what Postman helps you do, and that is the basics of how you interact with an API and get responses. Any questions anybody wanted to know?
Hey, Sina. So this looks interesting. One quick question on the responses. Do you have any ability to export the data that we got, or maybe and save it as a local file or something like that?
Yeah, I think you should be able to save response to file.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anything else?
I think that's
all right. Okay, cool. You stop sharing. That's what I had for today.
I have one quick question. Can we get all the data? Like we have a place where we are specifying the like some tool ID we have. Is it possible to get the list of all of the tools, like not just tools itself, but all the clients that are placing order and stuff like that?
Yeah. So if the API has that endpoint, so it all depends upon what the API creator has let you do with it. It's a very controlled interface. Okay, you can't do whatever you want to do. You can only do whatever they let you to do, right? So say for example, in this API, they only let you check all the tools available, get details of a single tool, get all the orders, get details of a single order, create, update, and delete an order. That's all you can do on this API. You can't do anything further.
Okay.
Let us say if you want to
So I didn't read that we can only get details of a single order. I was actually asking if we can get all of the orders.
Okay. So this is an API that I'm working with currently, right? So here they have, so this is their API documentation. So they have lots of different APIs. Okay, one API for bill. Okay, so these are all the different APIs. They have general config API, my stuff API, hubs API, billing API, accounting transaction API, and stuff like that. So if I go into billing API, I can check their invoices, etc. Okay, so you can get the billing invoices, you can download them, you can create more invoices. All that is possible. If you go into hubs and projects, you can check what all projects they have, update a project, delete a project, create a project. All that we can do.
Okay.
So it depends on what they let you do. Yeah, in short, that's the answer.
Okay. All right. Yeah.